Good evening. It is 6:30 on the nose on Thursday, the 23rd of January. Welcome to our second.
Recording in progress.
Oh, that's cheery. This is our second January meeting. Tonight's meeting, the Arlington School Committee, is being conducted via Zoom, is being recorded, and is also being simultaneously broadcast on ACMi. Because all members are not present, we have two members who have developed a relationship with some little virus or bug out there. All votes will be required to be taken by roll call. So I see Dr. Allison Ampe on Zoom. Dr. Allison Ampe, would you say hello to us to confirm your presence and your ability to speak?
Hi.
Good evening. And I don't see Ms. Gittleson yet.
She's right there.
Oh, there she is. Hello, Ms. Gittleson. Good evening. She must have just popped in. Ms. Gittleson, hello.
Hello, I can hear you.
Okay, great. Thank you. We can hear you now, too.
Okay.
Persons wishing to join the meeting by Zoom may find information on how to do so on the town's website. Persons participating by Zoom are reminded they may be visible to others. All participants are asked to activate your camera and provide your full name in the interest of developing a record of the meeting. All participants are advised that people may be listening who do not provide comment, and those persons are not required to identify themselves. Finally, both Zoom participants and people watching on ACMi can follow the posted agenda materials also found on the town's website using the Novus Agenda platform. That brings us to public comment. Individuals or group representatives may address the committee on items of school business. The length of the public participation segment shall normally be no more than 20 minutes. Speakers must identify themselves by name and address, and will be allowed up to 3 minutes to present their material. The chairperson may reduce speaking time if needed and/or may permit extension of the time limit, neither of which will apply tonight. Speakers may offer such objective criticism of the school operations and programs as concern them. In public session, the committee will not hear personal complaints about school personnel nor against any member of the school community except for the school committee or the superintendent in their capacity as the operational leaders of the Arlington Public Schools. Under most circumstances, administrative channels are the proper means for disposition of legitimate complaints involving staff members. The public is reminded that the school committee does not hold jurisdiction over the performance of school personnel other than the superintendent. First up will be Patricia Vasiliev-Misuro. Will be followed by Dmitry Vasilev.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Patricia Missouro, 18 Cleveland Street, Arlington. So I'm going to reference the PowerPoint deck which Gayatri has sent a few weeks ago, and some of the plan for us parents is to kind of go through particular areas in the deck.
I'm having trouble hearing you. ACMi,
can you hear me better?
Yeah, you just over-modulated. Can you adjust the modulation?
Is my time running?
You might be sitting too close to the mic.
Is it better? Is it better? Yes? Okay.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. So the plan is to present some of the areas in the deck that one of our parents sent out, so we want to highlight some of the things. So I printed out slides 7 through 10, and so some of it is just some of the trends across the Arlington and other towns. So we wanted kind of, you have the different grades, and let's focus on the grade 5, which is where some of the schoolers that started. And this is how the whole parent engagement started. So if you look at the top 2 lines, those are Belmont and Lexington, where there's a lot of individualized math focus around the kids. Not all kids are kind of made out of the same fabric, and they have a lot of options from middle school on. And you can see that the kids are really exceeding. This is really the number and the percentage of the exceeding kids. Arlington is actually doing quite well by high school. And I think it does show that once in high school, there's more flexibility. The kids are trying to pull up and accelerate. But you see through middle school, they're kind of staying low I think just as we know, the kids that are being asked to stay back as opposed to pull up are waiting for the opportunity to flourish and grow. So we wanted to show this trend, to show that there is demand, and there are kids, there's a large cohort of kids who could really benefit from some of this acceleration or options earlier on in their education. So that's slide 7. Then slide 8, which is the next page, it's again around the cohort, the percentage of kids that exceed expectations and MCAS. This is again the 5th grade, so it's the kids cohort, the largest one. 18%, it's 92 children, where only 3% of those were allowed to accelerate. So that's leaving out a lot of kids. That's 77 kids who could accelerate that were left out. Coincidentally, it's also 18% of kids that attend RSM, which shows a lot of parents, we look for options. It's not to be shunned upon, but we do it because we see our kids are interested. It's 1 in 5, 1 in 6 children. Again, that's around that. And a little bit on heterogeneous learning models. I think you know about Newton. I would encourage to click the links which have the articles behind each one of these examples. So Newton implemented heterogeneous classes 3 years ago. Today, almost 100% of teachers are begging to roll it back because not just the kids on one end of the kind of interest and acceleration are not benefiting, but both the kids at the lower end, which are having trouble learning, are not benefiting. It's not benefiting either of the ends. They kind of were at the tip of the spear, but of going with it. But in fact, they didn't have real KPIs or anything around it. So today, everybody's saying it was too far. Let the kids be looking around like their unique areas of interest. We are not all the same, and we should kind of, bring the kids who are interested up. And then everyone is benefiting from
Thank you. Your time
setting
has
the bar
expired.
high. I want to show you the school district who did it, and it was the best for everybody.
You can submit anything you like via writing through the secretary. Mr. Vasilov.
Thank you. My conversation will be also
Name and
about
address, please.
Dmitry Vasilyev, 18 Cleveland Street. My presentation will be, my talk will be also about math. And, well, my view of this is that we need to make it about kids, what kids desire. And it's important for us to listen kids. We think that they're small, right? But the kids can be really, really independent, even when they're 7 years old. And if kids want to accelerate, we need to listen to this, not be dismissive that, oh, these are parents. And there is a big fraction of genuinely interested kids to accelerate in math. And we need more pathways to help them out to realize that. And with this regard, there are three important things, is that it is important to expand math 6 bypass. Right now it's at 10%, and it's very little. It's not really the bar for this is very low. And a lot more people can be accelerated. And for some reason, this year was historically low, and there is no explanation for this. Another one is ability for children to be doubled up at 8th grade in algebra and geometry. These occupy very different parts of people's skills, and I see no reason why not, and it's being practiced in many places. And the third one is also accepting credits from accelerated programs, for example, Singapore Math or RSM. And this is an uncomfortable thing that indeed big fraction of students take these acceleration programs. RSM, big, and I know you don't mean to, but you take credit for it. It lifts up the scores. And we can do the numbers by how much this effect of this one in 4 maybe students take this. This actually is reflecting in the school. So how about we make it accepted? Accept that this lifts the grades. So we take this, we can take this credit, say a person took geometry and RSM, make it a credit, to as if he would be attending it here, or with certain like standardized testing. These are three things which I think would help the children to not to be that bored and go over the second curriculum several times in a row. Just that it's important that for us to listen to our children. Also, it's important to acknowledge on an independent topic that, oh yeah, okay, I will do it next time. Thank you very much.
Gayatri Perlin. Good evening.
Good evening, everyone. Gayatri Perlin, 88 Paul Revere Road, Arlington. I just wanted to, again, appreciate your patience and your collaborative nature in hearing us out over and over again. And I think this has been a really great two-way conversation, a three-way conversation, really. I had the opportunity, grateful for Dr. Homan's time. And I think we're really making progress in working three-way collaboration to implement some changes that are that the community, some members of the community are requesting. And it's just particularly exciting that we're moving forward. And we really appreciate your guidance from the board and helping us understand what the operational and logistical issues are on the ground that you are facing. And I want to be just very mindful that, you know, we hope that we can come to an understanding and a collaboration. There are just a couple of things that I want to emphasize. I know that others have touched upon it. First, this idea of heterogeneous models. I'm not sure if there's enough data to claim one way or the other, whether it has positive impact or negative impact. I can certainly see both sides of the coin. What I really want to emphasize, though, and what we're seeing in the math curriculum, at least that's what I can comment on, is that the range of heterogeneity is the real problem here. So anecdotally, what I'm seeing or hearing from my kids, my own kids, is that you have performers, say, let's take sixth grade as an example. You have performers within one classroom that are at the fourth grade level versus performers who are at the eighth grade level. And the real challenge, I think, is not that heterogeneous is good or bad. It's really what we should think about and consider is narrowing that gap and still maintaining heterogeneity, because I think that is a more equitable model, but also allowing pathways for the extreme ends of the spectrum to benefit. The second point I wanted to emphasize is that we've heard some comments and opinions, and we should listen to all sides, but some folks have expressed that choosing to send our kids to math accelerated curriculums or enrichment programs is choosing for our kids to be bored. And I guess I would ask you to consider that that is not the case. As the data shows, there's a real demand for accelerated models. And I think parents, especially parents in the STEM fields, recognize that, and they see that the economic opportunities are driving those decisions. And now that RSM is here and established by now, it's really hard to compete with that kind of economic model. So let's work together to bring up the level of our options within APS.
Thank you.
Just
Your time
one
has
last
expired.
comment.
Your time has expired. Thank you. Next up, we'll be recognizing our folks at the table. We have Julie Keys, our president of the Arlington Education Association, as well as our student reps from Arlington High School, Zach Fan and Leo Frisch. Zach and Leo, do you have something to tell us?
All right. First up, we want to talk about Battle of Bands. We had this on last Friday, and we had some pretty great community turnout. And it was a great opportunity for our students to showcase their musical talent.
Yep, and then also for upcoming events, February 28th, the Student Council is hosting a winter crafts market, and we're still looking for a few more community vendors. And then also the senior class is hosting a fundraiser this Sunday with Blue Ribbon, so it's not that far, and 20% of proceeds, if you mention the class of 2025 while ordering, will go to us.
Now, wait a minute, you're telling me if I go to Blue Ribbon on Sunday, this is no other day, but next Sunday,
Yep.
and I go in there and it's the class of 2025, I've got to say, I love the class of 2025 and I'm coming in because they told me to come in?
You can
Right.
mention anything about AHS.
Oh, anything about AHS, so I could
Right.
be, any class I want, but it was for the Arlington High Day, right?
Well, you can say 2025, give us some credit a little bit. Yeah.
Okay, but if I do that, I get this wonderful, delicious food and what?
And 20% of
20% off.
No, 20% goes.
Oh, no, no,
Oh,
no, no,
20%, 20% off
Give you a
that goes
discount,
to the class of 2025
Well,
into your little treasury?
it's the same price for you guys.
Yeah,
but-
okay.
but it's an excuse to get Blue Ribbon, and we get 20%. of
So
the
I
proceeds.
pay 20% less to them and the 20% goes to you.
No, you pay the 20% to
No,
them.
no, I'm paying them the whole thing, but they keep 80, they give you 20.
Yes,
In other words, this is a great deal.
it is a great
So-
deal.
So that everybody should be going to Blue Ribbon on Sunday, right?
Yes.
And saying Arlington High School and split that 20% out for the students, right?
Correct.
Eat hearty. Thank you.
And then another highlight was that today was the first day of the second semester. So as a senior myself, it's very exciting. I don't know how Zach feels about it, but I know that some
Happy new
spirits are lifted.
semester.
Also, with that new semester, the semester-long exchange students have left, and we have a new batch of the semester-long exchange students. In terms of sports, we're like halfway through the season, roughly. For some sports, we're almost near the end. A few highlights: the basketball team is ranked 10th in Massachusetts, and Bill Belichick visited AHS today.
Really?
He met with,
He was ushered in the back.
I think, the football coach, and he met with one of our AHS football players. And then last,
Was he recruiting for North Carolina?
yep,
Aha!
we have an offensive lineman.
Well, got to be a public school, right?
And last up, just in an advisory, there's been a big focus in social emotional learning. I think that's pretty interesting.
Okay, so we've got social emotional learning. Bill Belichick came through here, and there's that wonderful thing at Blue Ribbon Barbecue on Sunday where 20% of your purchase is going to go to the class of 2025.
Yeah.
I mean, this is, how cool is this?
All right, that's
That's
it.
all we have.
That's all. Do any of the other members of the committee have any questions of our representatives from the high school? Seeing none, Superintendent.
Which Sunday are we talking about? The one that's coming up or the one after
One
that?
that is coming up, so
Okay, 26?
the 26th.
Great, thank you.
Sunday, January 26th. Eat your Blue Ribbon food. We'll be there. Okay. Next up, Student Leadership Conference will be with, I'm losing my place here, Paul McKnight and Alexis Daggett. So if you'd come forward, please.
I will let the two of you explain the trip.
Hello, good evening. Good evening, everyone. My name is Paul McKnight. I'm a Dean of Students at Arlington High School and also a co-advisor of the Student Council.
Hi, my name is Alexis Daggett. I am one of the history teachers here at the high school and also co-advisor for Arlington High's Student Council.
So we're here this evening to seek the committee's approval of, this is a domestic overnight trip planned for March. So we're talking about the Massachusetts Association of Student Councils annual conference. The Massachusetts Association of Student Councils is an affiliated with the Massachusetts School Administrators Association, which is also oversees the MIAA as well as the State Student Council Organization. This event is the banner event of the year. Over 1,000 student leaders from over about 70 to 80 high schools across the state gather at the Resort and Conference Center, renamed now the Emerald Resort in Hyannis, for a 3 days of workshops and leadership training. We have been attending this conference for a decade now, since 2015, virtually for 2 years during the pandemic. We plan to take 12 students with us on this trip, leaving on Wednesday morning and returning on Friday, right before the end of the school day. And it's a really exceptional investment in our students and in their leadership. They get tremendous ideas from other schools, other student councils, and return very energized and inspired to, not only enhance our student council, but also our school community.
Excellent. Any questions from the committee? Do I hear a motion to approve?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Thielman, second by?
Second.
Second by Ms. Morgan. Any further discussion on the motion? Hearing none, roll call. Ms. Exton?
Yes.
Mr. Carden?
Yes.
Dr. Allison Ampe?
Yes.
Mr. Thielman?
Yes.
Ms. Gittleson?
Yes.
Ms. Morgan?
Yes.
And the chair votes in the affirmative, 7-0. Have a great trip, and I hope you come back and tell us about it.
We shall. These guys
Or
will.
they may.
Or they may. Yeah. Are you guys going? Well, that makes sense. You're here, so you must be one of the folks who were involved in that as well.
Yeah.
Okay. Should have had you talk about this. I don't know. Better to hear from you guys than a bunch of adults. Especially when you get 20% of the Sunday deal over Blue Ribbon. Okay, next up, Arlington High Program Studies. Superintendent.
All right, Dr. Jenger is here with me. We have gone through the comments that were provided at the CIAA meeting last week together. I think we caught everything that was shared at our last regular meeting, as well as at the CIAA subcommittee meeting. And those are the changes that were made. We didn't make any other major changes. Included some cleanup of tables and notations on some of those tables to make sure that our language is consistent, making sure that we're referencing back to consistent language about the different leveling options at AHS, an adjustment of some of the language around pre-calc, ensuring that all of our pre-calculus classes count for honors credit, because they're considered higher level coursework by the state, so it makes sense that if we're credited with that as a school, that the students are credited with that as individuals as well. And I'm pretty sure that's the bulk of the adjustments that we made. We'll talk about the competency determination later in subcommittee reports. Dr. Jenger, anything to add?
No, I think that is pretty clear. I mean, once we went in this sort of third round commentary, which we haven't always had time to do, I think we got pretty deep into formatting and asterisks. So hopefully a lot of language is clearer, but there's not substantive changes beyond what it was we discussed.
Ms. Morgan, you're the chair of the CIAA subcommittee. I'll leave this to you.
We met on Friday and had a conversation about this, and I think we were expecting to vote on it tonight.
So if you'd like to make a motion.
Oh, yes, please. So moved, whatever the motion is. No, I move that we approve the 2025-2026 Arlington High School Program of Studies as submitted.
Okay, motion by Ms. Morgan, second by Mr. Thielman. Any discussion? Ms. Exton.
I'm going to abstain. I haven't had an opportunity to fully process all this.
Okay. Any other questions or comments for the committee? Dr. Allison Ampe, I see your hand up.
Thanks. How is it going to work? Because we've got the competency determination still outstanding. Are we going to approve it and then we'll approve this to follow, or reapprove the whole document, or what?
Superintendent.
So I think our plan, as I understood it at the end of our CAA subcommittee meeting, is that we have a placeholder right now in the program of studies that says that we will message at a later date the sort of complete package that will have the voted competency determination once that's final in it. We'll do a first read of that tonight if that's what the committee wishes to do. And then if we do a second read of it with any adjustments that we make, at a future meeting, we will drop it into that document and do a reshare. But this allows us to start course selection, knowing that the competency determination will come right behind that. And I think, you know, if the courses that are the competency determination are required anyway for high school graduation, so we're not super concerned about that impacting people's course selections.
Okay, any other questions or comments from the committee? Hearing none, there's a motion on the floor by Ms. Morgan, seconded by Mr. Thielman. Roll call vote. Ms. Exton?
Abstain.
Mr. Carden? Yes. Dr. Allison Ampe?
Yes.
Mr. Thielman?
Yes.
Ms. Gittleson?
Yes.
Ms. Morgan?
Yes.
Chair votes in the affirmative. That's a 6-0-1 vote. The program of studies is adopted. Next up, discussion of panorama results. Mr. Coleman, Superintendent.
All right, and I believe that our spectacular Director of Social Emotional Learning, Mental Health is going to join also, Ms. Olander, as well as Dr. Coleman, Director of Data Research and Accountability. So we, as everybody knows, conduct our annual panorama surveys in the fall and usually do a spring administration. Sometimes the spring administration is pared down a bit. But we resurvey on a lot of the same categories. We did this again in the fall. We also had some adjustments. We've talked a little bit about some of the features that we have replaced mental health screeners with to do SEL, sort of self-competency evaluations with the students. And so Ms. Olander's here to talk about that also and what some of the takeaways are from those survey results, some of the ways we're thinking about using those in the future. So I will share my screen and I'll drive. And watch for you to cue me if you need to have me change the slide. Take it away.
First off, thanks all for having us. We're happy to talk about the results. As was mentioned, we did have some changes. I'm really happy that Michael Yolander is here to talk about some of the SEL changes that we've done as well. So overall format, very similar to what we presented last year. We really tried to think about this survey in the context of our goals, our vision, our mission, our strategic plan. We really wanted to make sure that this presentation was highlighting a lot of those core aspects that we say we are being intentional about. And up here, we just have some of those things connected. At the end of the presentation, we'll take a little bit of time to talk about some of the connections to current initiatives, as well as some of our thinking for future administrations, as well as future goals or future changes that could be thought of or considered. Next slide, please. So I know we've probably read this a lot. I just want to kind of highlight a couple of the key words, ideas, concepts in our vision statement. The sense of belonging, growth and joy, and that students are empowered. Those core values will be brought up throughout this presentation. So I just wanted to kind of, again, bring everyone's attention to that. Next slide, please. As well as when we're thinking about the collection of surveys, we don't want this to be something where we just collect survey data for the sake of collecting survey data. What we are trying to do last year and also this year is make sure that we're really strategic and intentional about thinking about what this survey is measuring for us relative to the goals that we've set out to accomplish. So these are 4 goals that are within our strategic plan with some of the words that are highlighted that are key things that this survey will give us some feedback on. One of the great parts about this year, and again, we'll talk about this, is we've expanded the survey to include the SEL and well-being. So it's allowing us to look at students in a little bit of a different lens and get some more information about their experiences in the school. Next slide, please.
So just to support grounding the new areas in which we collected some student-specific data, we wanted to reshare this is the social emotional learning competencies framework that's put up by Castle, largely followed and used by all school districts or most that are working around these trying to build social emotional learning competencies, self-awareness, self-management, responsible decision-making, relationship skills, and social awareness are these 5 standards as CASEL puts them out. You'll see Panorama uses slightly different language, but they have correlated their questions and their data crunching to align with, to help us understand student progress along these standards.
So thinking about who was part of the survey, this year we actually surveyed 4 different stakeholder groups as opposed to 3. 5, I guess, if we want to think about staff as including both staff and teachers. The survey is constructed to be disaggregated. Up here is each of the categories for each of the stakeholder groups that we looked at. We tried to create this so that we have some connections among each of the different stakeholder groups so we can look at, let's say, different sense of classroom experience and rigorous expectations across those groups and get different perceptions and different thoughts for those groups. Next slide, please. Yep, thank you. It's interactive. So for this year, and these are all rough estimates. These aren't exactly, but they're, I would say, plus or minus 2%. For our families, we had 953 responses. This year was 17%, a little bit lower than last year. For students, this was by far and away our best year of response rates. We really tried to be thoughtful about our windows for administration. Magali and her team were really instrumental in ensuring that at the school level, a lot of the SEL and well-being surveys were done well. So 85% of all of our grade 3 and 12 to grade 3 to 12 students completed both surveys, the SEL well-being as well as the general school survey, which was great for us. And of our teachers and staff, teachers are thought of as all those folks who are in our Tier 1 classrooms. Staff is basically all the other staff that are working within a school, principals, coaches, anybody else. We were able to have 59% of our respondents, our entire staff respond for this year, which we're happy about. Next slide. So next couple slides, just kind of bear with us. We're going to talk about a couple of these little highlights. This is just for each of those categories that was highlighted before. The percent that responded favorably. And what that means is that you're conveying something in the affirmative, with also the change from the direct prior administration. For some of these, we dig a little bit deeper. When we sat down and did a broader analysis of the entire district, there are certain trends and connections that we really thought were great to point out. So a couple that I'll just highlight right now. The idea of rigorous expectations, 78%. We'll talk about that in a little bit, quite high. That is a sense of a student's belief that the teaching, the learning, the academics, the things that they're experiencing is of good, rigorous quality. Sense of belonging we'll touch on in a little bit as well. It's been a really positive trend for us across the board. We're also going to be hitting on teacher-student relationships. We're going to be making some connections among some of these ideas. Next slide, please. Same information, but this is our 6 through 12 group. Again, highlighting some of those core aspects, the rigorous expectations, teacher-student relationships. A lot of these were really interesting when we dug down into the trend. They've been showing us some good information. Next, please. Family School Relationship Survey. We'll be coming back to this one a little bit, specifically the learning behaviors in context of others. For some of these, just to highlight, for some of these categories and for some of the ways in which we share this, we were able to access all of our data across all of the administration, and Panorama will norm it for us. So they're giving us a sense not only of how we're doing comparative to our prior administration, but normed against all of the other schools and districts that might be using this. Those are the little dots that you see on the side. We'll be talking about a couple of these. We were psyched to see, we'll highlight this in a little bit, the family school communication improving, that school-based communication has been improving so much for the past year or so. Next slide. This is our staff. These are all those folks that are non-Tier 1 teachers. Great information here in conjunction with the teachers. Specifically in this group, as well as the teachers, we'll be talking about the professional learning a little bit later on and their experiences there.
I just want to clarify, make sure that I've got this straight and so
Yes.
that we've got this straight. is that what it did is it's grabbing teachers with rosters, right? Is that how it's
Yeah.
identifying teacher versus staff, which is why we have licensed teachers
Yep.
who are on the staff survey because of how that's designating, right?
That's right, yeah. So, I mean, I don't want to get too much in the weeds, but our student information system, our system in which we organize and house all of the information for our students and teachers, that is, we want this to be connected so that it's, if there are folks who have moved on or hired, they're talking to our student information
So
system.
they get a link.
There's a link, yeah, right. So we want it to be so that it's connected, it's relevant, it's anonymous. It's one of those things where we want all that to be taken on the back end, but we choose certain ways of categorizing folks within the student information system, which designates you based on certain criteria that you're a tier 1 teacher with a classroom of all these kids, whereas another staff member might be an interventionist. They're not going to have, even though they might be a licensed teacher, they don't have a tier 1 classroom. They are doing more support classrooms. They would be, in the eyes of this and the way we've disaggregated it, they would be considered staff.
Right.
Yeah.
And that can be different from previous administrations, and some of that has to do with how we administered the SEL survey this time, because that gets linked to that scheduling coursework rostering,
Yeah,
right?
so the SEL and student well-being, that's for students.
Right.
And that one is done a little bit differently, but we did lose, and we'll definitely touch on this, because this SEL and well-being survey, we really want to know if a student is telling us about themselves, we want to know who that student is. So you lose a little bit of the anonymity, but what we've done in response to that is limit the number of folks who have access to that information. So Mogli and her team will have access to
So
that.
I wanted to point that out mostly because there are teachers in the staff survey.
Yes.
There are only teachers with a roster on the teacher survey. And that's not the same as it's always been, so it can be a little confusing.
And there's no way that, like, they could all be mishy-mashy together. Like, that's not a thing.
Yeah.
Those dots don't, like, not so much.
What we can do, and we've talked about this internally, is we just have to make a new field within PowerSchool and think about how we'd want to disaggregate all of that, and then have that sent to Panorama. We could definitely do it. It just creates another field that needs to be inputted for everybody, managed, and think about how it would fit into our overall work. Yep. All right. Thank you. Thank you for the question. Appreciate it. Here's the teacher survey. So the big difference with the teacher survey is that here we're talking about those experiences a little bit more with students. There's a few more questions, a few more categories. You can see here the student focus. The professional learning, again, I kind of mentioned a little while ago, just going to highlight it because that will be discussed in a little bit when we dig into the data. I'll turn over the next two.
So we're sharing similar overview of the SEL and well-being survey results. So the first slide is our grades 3 to 5 students, and overall, what's interesting is that despite what we might feel about the percentage numbers listed, interesting that we have this normed now that we are doing some of this data collection in Panorama. So compared to everyone, lots of green, and like the data comes back in shades of green. There's dark green is like super great, and like regular green is also great. So there's lots of green, and yet, lots of areas that we can be thinking about, not only growth, moving that needle, but also how this data helps us connect to how we would understand and maybe move other aspects of our data. So if you go to the next slide, similar for our 6 to 12 respondents. Something that came up last year when we were talking about this change that I just want to report back out on that I was pleased with was that our response rate from our high school students was high. So something that we really could not get with our previous way of screening was a lot of high school participation, and that was a concern. And with the Panorama, I think it was 78, 80% of, maybe even over 80 for the high school students. Yeah, so that was just a huge plus that I was pleased to see because it was something we had talked about last year. So that's just sort of the overview. Yeah, so what we want to kind of move into now is thinking about like what is the story, if you go to the next slide, thanks, that this sort of tells us about how we are moving towards our priorities and our goals and our values as a district. So we've noticed some overall positive trends. The first 4 bullet points talk about where we saw growth overall. And then we also know that we have some areas where we sort of stayed the same, maybe went down a little bit, and we are going to continue to dig a little bit more into that. Yeah, go ahead.
We are going to dig a little more into this in the next few slides, but just wanted to point out a couple little kind of nuances. Towards the bottom, the student perception of rigorous expectations remains steady, but the family member's perception of the learning behaviors, there's this connection among a lot of those questions, still remains low. And we'll dig into that in a little bit. That's been a really interesting one to look at over the past couple of years.
Next slide. So because we did expand the Panorama SEL Wellbeing Survey to the whole, well, to the all grades 3 through 5, I just want to report out back to you a little bit about what we learned through expanding that pilot to all grades that we surveyed. First of all, what was nice for the people working directly with the students is that the data did not present any big surprises in terms of feeling like students were missed or students were over or under-identified. The data felt really accurate for those who work day-to-day and most closely with the students. That enabled us to strike this, to find that sweet spot of knowing who to check in with, who to do interventions with, and allowing those interventions to then really feel more meaningful and targeted and more accurate than I think some of our screening data felt like in the past. The other thing that has come up that's was a surprise, was not something I was expecting, but is a positive that the social workers and counselors have been feeling especially good about, is that Panorama, the way it collects the data, allows for the identification of areas of growth or need, right? That's where we're targeting our interventions, but also areas of strength where students perceive themselves to be having their assets and their strengths also identified and honored. And in those conversations, in those follow-up conversations that we're having with students, we're able to be thinking about them more as their whole self around their SEL and well-being, their strengths and their struggles, which was something that we really wanted to focus on this year and going forward and aligns with our values. So that's been a positive, both just in the moment and I think overall for the picture it paints of who our students are when we look at them through this SEL and well-being lens. Is it back to you or is it?
So I just want to throw out a caveat before we start digging into this a little bit more deeply. Everything we're showing is district level. We haven't disaggregated based on any student groups. We haven't disaggregated in any other way. These are really just 30,000-foot snapshots, more global trends of what we're seeing. We'll make some connections to last year to this year. I really try to refrain from making a lot of judgments. What I'm looking for is trends and looking for patterns and trying to support folks in thinking about what they could be doing to find different correlates to what they might glean from their more on the grounds data. So let's jump into this right now and kind of think about some of the things. So this idea of sense of belonging, this has been a conversation for us for a while. Down at the bottom, a lot of these slides, I've included verbatim questions that are asked in this. And these are our students in grades 3 through 5 and 6 through 12. And what's been nice for me is seeing such a positive trend over the past couple of years, considering that this is an area of focus. Next slide, please. So this is just our grades 6 through 12 students. Again, not anything that's monumental, but this has been a steady increase where a lot of our students are reporting that they're experiencing better feelings, better emotions. That SEL data we'll connect in a minute. They're feeling a little bit more connected, a little bit better, how they feel and belonging in the school. Next slide. Tying to the SEL stuff.
Yeah, so the questions that Panorama allowed us to ask were around sort of prevalence of positive feelings and also challenging feelings, and our students are reporting a pretty significant level of overall positive feelings, and we can make some some interesting, smart guesses about how that correlates to sense of belonging. And another piece that we were sort of talking about is, you might recall that on the other sides, the student's sense of their ability to regulate emotionally, emotion regulation was on the lower end, even though it was still on the national scale quite high. What's great is that when our students are struggling, they are not perceiving that school is a place where they don't belong, that their teacher relationships are not supportive. So if they are perceiving more struggle with emotion regulation, I'm taking away from the overall positive feelings trends that school is still a place where it feels okay to be struggling, and it's not diminishing the sense of overall positive sense of self or well-being or belonging.
Which then pivots us to the idea of cultural awareness and action. Again, some questions down below. I included also the data from the community survey, the family and community survey as well. That was one of the greatest increases that we saw across the board. For us, this has been a goal. I know Dr. Creedle-Thomas has been focused on this. At the end, we're going to talk about a lot of the initiatives that are in place and a lot of the work that's being done. This is, for us, something that we've seen some growth, but it's also an area where we have a lot of improvement to go. Next slide. For us, this data has been relatively flat over the past couple of years. We are seeing some growth in some areas and areas of improvement in others. But again, the number of initiatives and the number of things that are being planned or that are already in action, I think it's been a great response by the overall district. Next slide. So for this one, the teacher-student relationship, this one we've been monitoring for the past couple of years. And sitting down with Magali, talking about this idea of positive feeling, belonging, what's been great in this sense is that both these categories are relatively high against some of the other categories, and we're seeing some growth. Next slide, just so we can see some of the trends. These are our 6 through 12 students. And what we're seeing is that students are conveying and are reporting that they have stronger relationships with their teachers. And again, it's adding to this idea that belonging is improving, folks are finding a spot, their positive feelings are pretty high, and it's great to see that those relationships with the folks in the school is also improving at a pretty good clip. Again, nothing monumental where we're skyrocketing and improving like dramatically, but that positive trend over the past 3 or 4 years has been really encouraging. School climate. This is how our folks feel about our overall school and their learning climate. This one's great in the sense that this one does show a good turn upwards. This is pretty much across the board for both our 6 through 12 and our 3 through 5 students. This is data from our community, from our parents. They're feeling more positive about what their children, what their kids are experiencing when they're in school. Great little trend. Okay. So this is where it kind of gets a little bit interesting. So these questions in the survey talks about the experiences that students have in their classrooms with their teachers, the idea of how rigorous are the expectations of the teachers in the school. Again, some questions down at the bottom highlighting things that are asked. Can we shift over to the trend, the next one? Again, nice, steady increase throughout all of our administrations. 73%, roughly 3/4 of our kids in 6 through 12. The percentage for our younger kids is even higher. This has been steady growth where when we're thinking about students in our high schools and our middle schools, they are reporting that they feel as though they're in classrooms where the expectations are high, that they're receiving good learning, that teachers really care about them academically and are pushing them to greater extents. Next slide. Which compared against the learning behaviors. So this is one of our lower categories. If you recall, this one was naturally normed. We'll look at that in a second. Although the community's perception of our schools and the learning that's happening in school is improving, it's great to see, it still does remain to be one of our lower categories for the overall students, which creates this kind of weird interesting thing to dig into where students are reporting, 3/4 of them are reporting that schooling is doing well for them. and 50% of the community is reporting that they're experiencing positive behavior. If you go to the next slide, this just highlights the fact that this data point is in the 20th percentile of this topic across all letter norms in terms of how folks are feeling about the experiences of the students. Okay. This is one of our greatest increases throughout. So a lot of these questions are more centered on school-based communication. These are all questions that are talking about how connected families feel to their school. This was awesome to see. I know Wes and her team have been doing a lot of work in supporting the schools and the buildings, so it's been great to see such a positive turn in that direction. 2/3 of those folks are reporting that it's good, consistent, valuable communication, which is awesome. So we did want to be thoughtful about this. We didn't want to put a slide for every single one of these. These are the staff and the teachers. Just to highlight what we took away as one of the core global experiences, more towards the lower end. You can easily see that professional learning is an area that we would want to be a little bit more thoughtful about. It was awesome to see such positive trends in well-being. It is great to see and hear from folks that they are feeling better, that they are starting to experience more support in the school. But there is this one little area where, we could be much more thoughtful. We could start to be more intentional about the professional learning and the learning that's being experienced by a lot of our staff. All right. So what next? This is where we get into a lot of the stuff we're trying to accomplish.
And so, for me, from the perspective of having new data and especially student-specific data, some of the takeaways, the actions we want to continue with the work that we're doing, but that this data is helping us kind of confirm and lean into, is we want to continue to maintain access to timely mental health support in addition to what's available in the schools through our partners with Cartwheel. We want to continue to be providing training to our staff around safety care, which is a de-escalation training program, as well as youth mental health first aid, really continuing to keep our students reporting that they feel supported and positive about their teacher relationships and feeling good and strong in school. We also want to see where we can take some of that success and think about our staff. So we are continuing work around fostering positive adult culture through school-based initiatives like school-specific committees. Also this year we extended Cartwheel to staff. So it's a sort of a staff therapy pilot. And it's something that is being utilized and we hope is also going to help continue to grow the sense of staff well-being. And then we have other initiatives are specifically around deepening our understanding and our work in cultural awareness and the actions we can take with the DEIBJ department, expanding the empathy interview work. Specifically, Bishop Dowling, Gibbs, and Pierce have gone through empathy interview cycles. So a couple of schools have reached out to me specifically about making connections. Now that I have student-specific data, what can that help me learn about my non-student-specific, more trend data around sense of belonging and that more anonymous data? So going deeper with the information that we have. And I think while at the 30,000 foot, like I said, there was lots of green, we have a great story to tell about most of our students' strengths in the area of SEL and well-being. We also now with this data have the ability to do some really targeted, specific, and informed follow-up with the students that we are still identifying with these surveys as still needing this support. And with the numbers that we are seeing, we're able to do really meaningful, targeted support. With that, and I
just to add one thing onto that, just finding that good balance between using all this quantitative data and being thoughtful about how we're going to access more qualitative data and more of that student voice and the teacher voice in this. So those empathy interviews have been an awesome source of just more access to understanding the student experience. Next slide, please. So a lot of this work is actually been taken on by Dr. Creel Thomas, Margaret's office, and they've been doing phenomenal stuff. So really thinking about some of our areas where we can have some growth, that professional learning for staff, thinking about the ideas course for educators, thinking about that experience of cultural awareness in action. Some of these areas where we could improve. Margaret's already on top of this. The ideas courses have been running well. They have a lot of involvement. They have a lot of engagement. There's been a lot of partnerships with other groups as well. The William James Teacher Diversification, PLC, for attaining more educators of staff. The DEIBJ Task Force is a working group that Margaret's been working on as well. And at the bottom, we have a couple of different professional learning opportunities for educators. So what's been really nice for us, me, when looking at all this information, is although we do have those areas that we have some growth, there are already a lot of things that are in place for us to continue and move forward. So it's been great planning, I think, on part of all the folks in charge of these different departments. For the closing comments, we'll open it up to all of you, actually. What questions or what would you like to ask us?
Okay, committee, Mr. Thielman.
Thanks. This was very comprehensive, and I appreciate all the time that went into it. And there's a lot of positive trends in here. I want to ask about one thing that caught my eye looking at this, which is the professional learning, the teacher survey of professional learning. We're in the 39th percentile. Is there anything like in the data? I know that there's the data, but are there like comments or anything concrete that you can give us to kind of tell us about that?
So we did ask questions where folks could give a narrative answer. It wasn't about the professional learning. So one of the things we're actually thinking about doing is for some changes. So we've already started to meet with Panorama. I have a meeting with them next week, so we could actually start to dig into some of those areas.
Superintendent?
Ms. Keys. We tried something new this year. People don't like it. I mean, for the last few years, we've had these choice menus that were very labor-intensive to put together. There were some challenges with like traveling between buildings on early release days, but people really loved the choice. They really loved working with people in other buildings. This year, we shifted it back to building-based. People don't like that. They want to have choices. They want to be able to do things that like they can use the points to renew their license. So we have a committee. We're working on it.
Great. I love the honest answer, Julie. It's
Yep.
great. Thank you very much. Saves a lot of time.
Superintendent?
Can Dr. Ford Walker also?
Yeah.
I don't want to
Yeah.
belabor it. I just, okay.
Sometimes we try new things, they don't work
Whoa,
out.
whoa, 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 whoa!
Okay, go ahead.
I'm the chair. I say who speaks. Dr. Ford Walker.
Okay, thank you. I'll be very quick. So, yes, thank you so much, Ms. Keys, for mentioning that. We do have a professional development committee that will be meeting to provide feedback about how the professional development has been going this year, but also to inform some of the work moving forward. I also want to mention, too, that a lot of the school-based professional development, at least K-5, centered around the EL curriculum. And so the work that needed to take place within schools at K-5 was really central to making sure that the rollout was successful. There will be changes and adjustments. We will have some sort of a blend/merger of what has happened in the past, meaning some selections, some menus for staff to choose from, but it won't necessarily be as wide. The options won't be as wide as they have been in the past. So we're looking at different things in order to make sure that we're addressing what the data is saying, which is that we need to look at what we're offering our staff.
Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Morgan?
Great. Can you remind me what our response rates have been historically on this? Like 17, it was 17, 18% for families.
Families, yeah.
So is that the lowest we've had, like?
No,
No,
it's not.
okay.
We've had fewer. During last year and this year, it's the fewest we've had. We had, I think, in terms of numbers,
Last fall was the highest we've had.
Yeah, it was-
We
yeah.
incentivized it. This fall is lower than that.
Yeah.
But we've been lower than this.
We have been.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So, because that's always the thing that I wonder, right? Like, I'm like, all right, once you see, and again, like, listen, a 20% response rate is really good for any survey. I'm a parent. I get a lot of emails. I don't do your survey, right? I
No
don't.
offense. It's all good. Yeah.
So, I think my question is always, you know, especially when we see movement on things, especially when we see movement on things like communications, which is like where the survey is coming at me from. I'm like, are we surveying the same people, right? Because to me, you know, when you see a dip in, when you see a dip in participation, either, and I don't know if you can like suss this out, it doesn't seem like it's the angry people who are filling out the survey, right? Like it doesn't, which is good. But I guess what I worry about is, are we actually getting the people who can access and engage our communication? They can handle that like repetitive onslaught of like, click this link, do this. Oh, this one actually didn't have the right date in it. So like, just wait for a few minutes and you'll get a new one. You know, that sort of like, we've all experienced it as parents, right? It just keeps coming. And is it that the folks who are engaging in this are the ones who can sort of work through the noise of all of that and do the survey so it feels to them like communication is good, and then some people else are just like, I'm so done with this, we're not even hearing from them. I don't know, like, do you all do you talk about who, and again, you can't know who they are, right? But that to me is the piece that I worry about a little bit, is that we're getting the people who can actually do it.
We do look through that. You know, in full disclosure, I'll look at that more based on the school level. So in the platform, one of the reasons I gave the caveat that this is 30,000 foot all the district is different schools have different response rates and they have different outcomes based on that. So to your point, you're right. It's not all apples to apples. There are some discrepancies, but when you do dig down into the schools, you can see other trends. My role is in supporting those folks and thinking about their data and thinking about what it's telling them. So I don't want to get into too much about like those outcomes, but yes, we do look at it that way. The percentage for 14%, whatever it was for this year, fairly normal relative to other years.
It was 17.
17 was 17 this year.
Well, that's what your slides say.
Yeah,
I don't know. I mean, I assume
numbers.
so.
Yeah, but last year, you know, the fall instance of this one, we had close to 2,500, but that was the best we had ever done. So, you know, there's all those little things. I try not to make too many judgments about all of this. Also, these are just little flashlights that help me look in dark corners to create different questions of inquiry, to go to different people and talk about what they might be seeing on the ground level.
A quick glance, Ms. Morgan, just at the sort of disaggregation by focal group areas and stuff of families. We do ask questions like, do you have a student who has an IEP? Do you have a student who has a 504? What is your ethnicity? What is your child's ethnicity? What language do you speak at home? It's a cross-sampling. That I would have to actually sit here and do percentages, but that looks like it mirrors our percentages to some extent, in some areas more closely than others probably.
Okay, especially for the families.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Ms. Sexton.
Thank you, and thank you for this presentation. So I'm looking at slide 26, the school climate, where there's sort of that dip and then that it goes back up.
Yeah.
And just based on what's here, it's a lot of fall data, and then that spring is sort of the dip there. And I'm curious if what you make of that.
So there are some of these that are a little bit tough. I think it was alluded to in terms of like the response rate. There were a few times when we could have administered that we didn't. So there's some gaps in the data. One thing we often look at is what's the difference between fall and spring year over year? Like, do you actually see, different trends? You have fewer folks who respond in the spring than the fall. The response rates across the board for everything has always been higher in the fall than it is in the spring. So we do try to take a lot of those things into account when we're looking at this overall. For me, just in the short term, the fact that from fall 23, spring 24, fall 24, we saw a little bit of a dip and a rebound, that to me, I think is somewhere where we want to kind of think about. I don't want to make too many judgments. It's just a nice positive trend where, folks overall are conveying their perception of school is a little bit more positive than it was last year, which is nice.
At first, I just thought like these were when the questions were administered, but there are spring for some other questions.
Yeah.
So like this one got left out of a
Yeah.
spring administration previously, is that?
So there have been times when it wasn't even administered, the whole survey wasn't
Right.
administered to the community. But then there are times also, and there's pros and cons to this. There were school safety questions that included last year questions about the pandemic and COVID. We've made modifications based on different questions as well as different categories year over year. And although it's great because it matches what we might be intentionally trying to do for that year, the downside is that you might lose those trend data at different points. So when we sit down and we think about our goals and think about what folks are working on, I've tried to, over the past year and a half, find that sweet spot between including everything that I feel is important for the trend data, but then keeping this survey manageable. I mean, to Ms. Morgan's point, some of these things get pretty long if I just keep everything in there every single administration. So we try to be thoughtful about that balance. The cost, though, and you're hitting the nail on the head, is that sometimes you may not see that domain of questions for a certain administration.
Yeah, I'm just curious. I'm curious if like what
happened
sort of
between-
what falls
Yeah.
off or what fell off in the spring between 23 and 24.
Yeah.
And how do you prevent
Yeah,
that from happening?
it's the generation of questions, like what happened, can we think about this at the school-based level, can we think about this at the district level, and, was there anything of note that could have impacted it?
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Carden.
Just a quick question. So the 6 to 12 SEL and well-being survey, this is the first time we've done that, or?
Yeah.
Yeah. Last year, we ran a small pilot to just test out the tool at the middle school level, both middle schools, but then we expanded it this year to all 6 to 12.
Great, thanks.
Yeah.
Dr. Allison Ampe.
Thank you, and thank you for this. Excuse me. I was wondering, especially for areas that are subjective, like the learning behaviors and stuff, I'm wondering if there's any way to have any norming, if there's any other questions that we can be asking, like my child reads this many hours per day or something, so that we get something. I'm thinking that if one parent is expecting just a little and gets a little, they're like, okay, that's what my expectation is. But if one parent's expecting a lot and gets a little, then they're going to be saying, well, that's not good, even though it's the same amount. And so I'm wondering if there's any availability of any sort of questions that would give some sort of norming for these things.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I should have been more clear about this caveat at the beginning. Most of the survey, the bulk of it, is perception data. It's not based on much else. It's literally your perceived world. And I don't want to say it's good or bad. It's part of the picture of the information that we try to capture. And it creates those questions. It creates the necessity for some students, those empathy interviews, to dig a little bit deeper, to understand things a little bit more granular than something like this would. We have a lot of the academic information. We've been trying to aggregate that all in a single place. So could we add a question here or there that might give a little bit more of a, what did you actually mean by that into this? Of course, we could definitely do that. We already have on the docket a couple of, I mentioned a little while ago, some edits that we're going to be considering heavily for the spring administration.
Okay.
Mostly around cell phone use.
I think I wasn't totally clear that what I meant was when we're comparing ourselves to other schools, that I don't know what their expectations are, so I can't say if their expectations are the same as what I would expect.
Yeah, it would be, I can always talk to the engineer about what other things, what other groups of questions are part of the norms group of questions. But, if we were to add something on, I don't know if we can get it on for everybody, if that makes sense. Yeah, that would be, yeah.
Mr. Fan.
Thank you.
I was just wondering if user results would be shared with the student body at all, because I know there's a disconnect. Like when students take this survey, they don't know like the results, or they don't know like how it's like. I didn't know that this school committee would be talking this much about.
Yeah, it's crazy.
One survey that I took.
So should we invite them all to the school committee presentation?
I was just wondering, like, is there any plan in place to share these results,
Yeah.
or like, do you want us to share the results?
Do you want-
I got this
Yeah.
feedback actually from a student, this advisory group that was working with me last year, and promised them that when we did this one, that we would get something back to the student body and share some of what we actually do with this, because that helps it feel relevant to all of you. And they made the very good point that we should do this with the students at the lower levels also, because, you know, they're like, well, I've been taking this thing for however many years since I was in middle school, and just now found out that you actually do something with it. And so we should think about that. We're working on some messaging now to go to the community. We wanted to start here and share some of the results with the committee at a large scale, but we'll work on some messaging to go out to teachers and staff about the results, and also to all of you.
Great, thank you.
And you can share this presentation with whomever.
Right.
It's a public document, but I think that it's really important to hear from you, and it's important for you to be here without revealing your personal response to the survey, whether you took it or not, and how you responded. That's not something we're interested in. But I think it's important for us to get a sense of how is the student body as a whole responding, and do you think there's validity in this?
I mean, yeah, people like, it's definitely something that, like, a lot of people do, but yeah, I don't know how, like, I feel like it would be a greater incentive if people knew, like, that maybe, like, funding would be changed depending on the results of the survey, and, like, yeah, that, like, we actually care about the, like, we make decisions based off of the results of the survey.
So if we're able to communicate that, then we will probably get greater participation and greater candor?
Yeah.
Okay.
It seems so.
Ms. Ulmer.
I just wanted to also ask if Ms. Olander could follow up. This did replace, as you mentioned, a screening tool that we used, and individual students have been identified for follow-up. Do you just want to talk about how, excuse me, when it was used for the screening purposes of who needed additional support, how that was handled as far as notifying an individual student while following up with you?
So in most classroom settings, when the screener was administered, there was a set of slides that were presented to students grades 3 through 12 that said, some of these questions are going to be anonymous, and some of these questions you're going to answer about yourself, and your answers might indicate that somebody's going to want to follow up. That person might also then want to talk to your parents, and so for those questions that did identify students who we determined based on the answers, we wanted to make sure we followed up with to check in. And Panorama didn't give us like a, hey, here are the kids that look at risk. We really had to go through all the questions and through the data and make our own determinations about who do we want to make sure we catch. So that's why on one of the slides you can see that the APS student safety question was pulled out, because we decided that any student that answered like, I almost never feel safe, or I really only feel safe once in a while, would be a student that we wanted to check in with, despite how vague the question was, and how upon follow-up, we learned from a lot of kids that they were like, oh, I don't know, I didn't get the question. Or the high school took the survey 2 days after the election. That accounted for a lot of how the safety question happened to be answered that week. But the intervention, having those conversations, even if that's all it was, is a point of connection between an adult and a student, and thinking about how we think and talk about well-being and mental health, right? So the safety question, and then the overall sense of well-being, if there was a prevalence, a strong prevalence of negative feelings and not a lot of positive feelings to counterbalance. The other thing that's interesting is that Panorama helps us pick out the kids where it looks like they just were like, I don't really care about this. And those kids kind of get flagged too in the Panorama math. So then we went through and made a closer look determination. We were like, yeah, let's just follow up. A conversation can't hurt. We're so proud of our high school students, actually, in particular, for participating at such a high rate this year. It did mean that a lot more high school kids got a check-in. it doesn't mean that they were like, in dire straits. It really was this opportunity to say there's something about the way you answered that makes us want to know more, and then talk to you about what you might need. And that might have been nothing. It might have been a whole host of interventions and supports that we could put in place. And that was the same process at every school, even if it was a third grader who also didn't understand the question. They still maybe got to check in, and that was, and then like you said, they'll be taking it every year. So it's good to sort of help them understand what they're answering. Does that speak to what you were saying?
Any other questions or comments from the committee? Hearing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
This was a good discussion.
Thanks for having us all.
Thank you.
Next up, we have an appointment to the Human Rights Commission. Ms. Exton?
Sure, thank you. So last Wednesday, the Community Relations Subcommittee interviewed 5 candidates to select someone to recommend to the full committee for appointment to the Human Rights Commission. We had a lot of strong candidates, but we unanimously voted to recommend Nadia Rozovsky for an appointment to the Arlington Human Rights Commission. She was very sorry that she was not able to be here this evening. Her resume, her letter of interest to apply for an interview, and a subsequent letter that she wrote because she was not able to be here tonight are all in Novus. And so with that, I would like to make a motion to appoint Nadia Rozovsky to the Arlington Human Rights Commission.
To fill the unexpired term expiring December 31st, 2026. Right. Second by Mr. Thielman.
Right.
Any comments or questions? I'll just say that this is an extraordinary candidate who's participated in the Civic Academy and has been volunteering with the commission. I'm very grateful that she is chosen to apply for this position, and we have the opportunity to appoint her. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, roll call. Ms. Exton?
Yes?
Mr. Carden?
Yes.
Dr. Allison Ampe?
Yes.
Mr. Thielman?
Yes.
Ms. Gittleson?
Yes.
Ms. Morgan?
Yes.
Chair votes in the affirmative, 7-0 vote. Ms. Rozovsky is appointed to the Human Rights Commission. Next, second read school committee meeting dates. That really could have been tucked into the consent agenda, but we need a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Carden, second by Mr. Thielman to approve the school committee dates as presented, which obviously are subject to change. Roll call. Ms. Exton?
Yes?
Mr. Carden?
Yes.
Dr. Allison Ampe?
Yes.
Mr. Thielman?
Yes.
Ms. Gittleson?
Yes.
Mrs. Morgan?
Yes.
Chair votes in the affirmative, 7-0, unanimous vote. Vote to acknowledge town appropriation for fiscal year 2026. Dr. Allison Ampe.
Thank you. Can someone read the number for me? So
The
this
motion, okay, I'll read the motion for you. The motion would be to acknowledge the 2026 fiscal year town appropriation, the school budget in the amount of $103,630,672.
Okay, so I so move.
Second.
Okay, motion by Dr. Allison Ampe, second by Ms. Morgan. Dr. Allison Ampe.
Yeah, so just to remind our massive viewing audience that this is the number that we're given by the town manager. We choose to acknowledge rather than accept or approve because we know our needs are greater than this money will cover. But that's the next part that we need to do for the budget sequence or the budget development process. So onward we go.
Any comments or questions from the committee? Seeing none on the motion, Ms. Exton?
Yes.
Mr. Carden?
Yes.
Dr. Allison Ampe?
Yes.
Mr. Thielman?
Yes.
Ms. Gittleson?
Yes.
Ms. Morgan?
Yes.
Chair votes in the affirmative, 7-0. That is a unanimous vote. Superintendent's goals, second read. Dr. Homan.
I sent goals to you earlier today. They're also posted, I believe, in Novus. And nothing has changed except, based on feedback, one action step in the district improvement goals, explicitly naming our intention to develop some explicit expectations around internal, external communication around email and correspondence with families and fellow staff members.
Okay, we're looking to approve the superintendent's goals. For motion, Mr. Thielman?
So moved.
Second by
Second.
Ms. Morgan on the motion. Any further discussion or comments? Seeing none, roll call vote. Ms. Exton?
Yes.
Mr. Carden?
Yes.
Dr. Allison Ampe?
Yes.
Mr. Thielman?
Yes.
Ms. Gittleson?
Yes.
Ms. Morgan?
Yes.
And the chair votes in the affirmative. That's a 7-0 vote. Reminding the public who is watching that this was discussed considerably in a previous meeting, and this is indeed a second reading. Superintendent's update, Dr. Homan.
All right. Just a reminder that there is a Lunar New Year celebration at Arlington High School this weekend on Saturday, January 25th. It runs from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. with some activities and booths for folks to check out, and from 6 to 8 p.m. with performances. And I am hoping to make it there with one of my small humans to enjoy the festivities. We have a new coordinator for our Japan Sister City partnership. We want to welcome Rebecca Booth Fox, who is an Arlington parent and will be joining us as coordinator for this partnership. And thank you. We want to say thank you to the Arlington community for an overwhelmingly positive response to requests for host families. We got more excitement about that ask than we needed host families, so we're looking forward to having more host families be able to participate in future years. We also want to thank the Arlington Community Education ACE program for their financial support of the host family info sessions and the coordinator role itself. It's exciting to be able to put some of our resources together to integrate this program and have some more sort of operational oversight of it in partnership with the town. Our Nagao Kakyo student visit dates are from April 29th to May 8th this year, and we're starting to plan for our students' trip to Nagao Kakyo in July as well. And the Arlington After School program is also engaging in a new partnership that we're beginning to work on with Playworks, and that will launch this spring with training for our Arlington After School program staff. Playworks has been working with several of our schools to integrate play routines and new games that are very safe for students and also help them build new connections with peers during recess times or other unstructured play times. A great opportunity to create a cohesive experience for our students is to partner that same organization with our after-school programs to engage those staff in some training that serves both as a retention goal, strategy for our after-school programs, which can have some of the highest turnover, and hopefully we can have some stable staffing, which will enable us to enroll more students, and also gives the students a coherent experience because they can experience some of the same routines in after-school and expectations as they experience during the school day. We also have staff that cross both programs. So we have Arlington after-school staff who also are recess staff at our elementary schools, and so to have them participate in that helps give them a full-time schedule and also helps with that consistency across the students' school day, which can have a really positive impact for really all of our students, but particularly for students who may have a harder time with some of the transition or those unstructured times where you're really focused on engagement with peers. So we're excited about this partnership, and we have also offered the opportunity for other programs at their, that program's expense, but our external programs to join in with us on this, and that will be getting started this spring and into the summer as they host their summer programs. I had a winter athletics update, but the students told you a little bit of it already. Sign up for spring sports does begin the first week of February. We do have over 500 students participating in winter athletics, which is about halfway through its season. Our boys indoor track team are co-champions of the Middlesex League Liberty Division for the first time since they entered the league. which was 14 years ago. As they mentioned, our boys and girls basketball teams are playing great. They're playing in Waltham while we're working on our gyms. The boys team is 11-1. The girls team matched their win total from last year with half of the season still left to play, which is fantastic. We're also want to celebrate a couple of our coaches that hit their 400th career game wins. Boys hockey coach John Masori, and our wrestling team is 15-0, and the coach just won his 400th career game as well in December, and is also a PE teacher at Ottoson. And the wrestling team is huge these days and very, very popular, and it has been growing over the past several years. So it's great to see so many students participating in extracurriculars. And thank you to our coaches who have done so much great work with our students. We do have one administrative hiring search open at the moment, and our special education team is covering that vacancy very purposefully and working with the team leads at the middle schools to make sure that they feel supported. Met with staff earlier this week to get their feedback on the search and to give them an idea of how we'd be moving forward and who they could go to if they needed assistance with something. And enrollments are in your materials. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions from the committee? Ms. Morgan?
I have a question about the Playworks stuff. Do we do any surveying of kids or families, or can we at some point, just to sort of see what they think about it? I know that apparently we think it's great. Anecdotally, I've heard, mixed reviews about it, and I guess I'm wondering about a kid who goes to a school where their recess is play worked, and then they go to after school, and then it's play worked again. And I don't know. Maybe it's as great as we think that it is. I just don't know, right? Because it is a like structured way to. In some respects, I can see how some kids may perceive that it is a structured way of recessing. Yeah. So I guess I'm interested in the perceptions of those kids. Actually, I'm honestly less interested in what their parents think about it, but I'm interested in how the kids feel about it.
Yeah, I can think about that with principals where we've been doing some of this. I know that at least initially, it can be a surprise, especially if you don't prepare the students for it, because they have to learn the routine. Once they've learned the routine, there's free play going on. They have a choice. There's still a check-in, but then if there is a conflict, there's like a routine to that helps to resolve it. So it is structured, but it structures the unstructuredness of recess, is what I would say. So there's still unstructured space. Like there's still space where you basically say, I'm going to go play over here, and you just go play over there. And there's not somebody structuring your play over there. Or you can say, I'm going to play this game that's organized, and there are adults playing with me. But they have that choice. And so there is a lot of freedom within that structure. And at least initially, in some spaces, if we don't prepare students fully for it, it's a surprise. Because
totally.
I'm going to line up at the end of recess, or I'm going to line up at the beginning, and I have somebody talking to me, and it's the beginning of the year, and there's just a lot. Like, I was so excited to see my friends and be at recess, and I have to kind of learn the rules of recess. And so that can be startling if they're not prepared for it, and I think we heard some of that at the beginning of this year, so we're going to adjust approaches when this happens. But once it's underway, what we have found is that a lot more of our students who may not have felt included at recess now feel included. They've got a place where they can go and know that I get to play with my peers over here. And the students who are like, leave my recess alone, they go have recess and they get left alone for the vast majority of recess, with the exception of a minute at the beginning and a minute at the end. So, we definitely don't want to interrupt students' free play time. It's very valuable time. And yes, we can certainly get an idea from them of like, how's recess feeling? And, are there things about it you would want us to adjust? So I can talk to the principals about it.
It sounds like we shouldn't ask them during the first 2 weeks. So
Probably not.
Probably not, right? So maybe we ask them a little bit. And yeah, perfect. Okay, great, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, we go on to the consent agenda. All items listed with an asterisk are considered to be routine and will be enacted by one motion. There'll be no separate discussion of these items unless a member of the committee so requests, in which event the item will be considered in its normal sequence. First will be warrant 25171, dated January 22nd, 2025, in the amount of $986,655.51. and the draft school committee meeting minutes of January 9th, 2025. Motion to approve the consent agenda by
So moved.
Mr. Carden, second by Ms. Morgan. Roll call vote. Ms. Exton.
Yes.
Mr. Carden.
Yes.
Dr. Allison Ampe.
Yes.
Mr. Thielman.
Yes.
Ms. Gittleson.
Yes.
Ms. Morgan.
Yes.
Chair votes in the affirmative. The consent agenda is approved. Subcommittee liaison reports and announcements. Budget. Dr. Allison Ampe.
So, budget still needs to schedule a meeting, and we'll be sending a doodle out. But we did have our APS co-hosted by the superintendent office and by the school committee. We had the budget forum on Tuesday and, was it Tuesday, Wednesday? I don't remember.
Tuesday.
We had Tuesday. And I'm hoping we could get some idea of how many people were attending online. We had a few dedicated people who came out in the cold and asked us questions. I want to thank Ms. Gittleson for helping go over the slides and for being the person who made sure that our our audio was okay, and also that we repeated our questions. And I want to thank the superintendent especially because she spent a lot of time on her slides and redoing them, and then really put a lot of energy and effort into the presentation. It has been recorded. It hasn't shown up on the budget information website. It's going to go onto the budget information page for FY26. It's not there yet, but it will be coming soon. And I think that's all for now. Yeah.
Thank you. Community Relations, Ms. Exton.
We met last week and we appointed someone to the Human Rights Commission this evening.
Wonderful. CIAA, Ms. Morgan.
We have a document in the liaison reports and announcements that I want to draw your attention to, and Dr. Homan sent it out, I believe, over email.
Let me speak to it a little bit.
I think we need to speak to it. So so we met on Friday. There was, most of us were there. In CIA, we reviewed the program of studies, which we approved tonight. We had a very robust conversation about the competency determination. Dr. Homan wrangled us all masterfully because there was a lot of feedback, which was good. And we spent quite a lot of time sort of going over the various pieces of this. And another draft was brought to us earlier today. It's in Novus, and what we need to sort of decide as a group is how we want to birth this, right? Do we want to use tonight as a first read, and then come back in 2 weeks and do a second read and have the opportunity to vote to approve it? Do we want to have a first read and have more opportunity for conversation at our next meeting? We were sort of agnostic in CIA. It was just myself and Mr. Carden who were there, and we certainly could have, I suppose, moved it forward as a subcommittee, but we sort of wanted to bring it here to get a sense of what folks wanted to do.
You want me to explain some of the
Yes,
adjustments?
why don't you?
Let me just note that I was also at the meeting, and that I was unsure of the direction that the committee wanted to take. The role of the chair is to lead the committee to where it wants to be, so I'm going to certainly listen to the committee as to which direction they want to go in terms of approving it. Dr. Homan.
Okay, so let me just, I appreciate the word masterfully, and I don't think it's the one I would use to describe an approach to explain some of this because it is confusing. The state voted in November to eliminate MCAS's competency determination, essentially making this a local determination. And so what that now means is that we have to sort of figure out, does it make sense for us to have a separate competency determination from the local requirement for graduation or not, which means you need to define what is a competency determination actually. And does it therefore make sense if, once we define it, for it to be a separate thing than just the local graduation requirement? And we've gone back and forth and sideways about this, me, Dr. Jenger, and Dr. Ford Walker, and I think have landed on what we would propose. And of course, to Mr. Schlickman and Ms. Morgan's point, are open to more discussion on this if necessary. So the way I would describe a competency determination is that this is a determination against a standard. It's against a set of frameworks that is external to the district. The local graduation requirement is a standard that is our standard that's based in coursework, not necessarily an academic standard for literacy, numeracy, and scientific concepts. So what a competency determination is saying is that you've met a baseline set of skills that has been historically defined by a test that tested at about the 10th grade level of academic standard. And so the competency determination as drafted here is saying that if students complete coursework aligned with the frameworks that covers this content or higher, then you've achieved the competency determination. If you do our local graduation requirements, you've achieved the competency determination. So we put the competency determination first because that's the first sort of step towards graduation. You meet that baseline literacy, numeracy, scientific concepts bar first, but it does not qualify you for graduation. Then you do all of your coursework and all of your credits that are attached to being a student here at Arlington High School. You take the appropriate courses. And if you've met the competency determination, but we need to consider something like a waiver because of circumstances that preclude you from taking, for example, all of the years of world language that we have in our graduation requirement, then we can consider that against completion of a competency determination, which says you've met sort of a baseline against standards and frameworks that says that you're ready for the working world. And so those waivers are a different kind of consideration in those circumstances, because we wouldn't waive a competency determination, but we might consider an adjustment for a student if they've earned their credits against one of these, depending on circumstances, which does happen. Not frequently, it's rare, but we have students in alternative programming. We have students who take a different path through high school, and we need to be able to consider that against also a baseline standard that has been set and has existed for a lengthy period of time, and what is that going to be? So the competency determination is a different thing than the local graduation requirement. If you meet the local graduation requirement, you have met the competency determination. If you meet the competency determination, you have met the first benchmark in graduating from high school, but you have not qualified yourself to graduate from high school yet. And so we lay it out with competency determination first, then the graduation requirement, which is unchanged, but states that you need to meet the local requirement for the competency determination, and then you need to meet these criteria. And we would recommend this for the class of 2025, students who have not yet met a competency determination, or for future students who have already taken MCAS, met the competency determination, they would already have met it. Any students who haven't done that yet, this would be their competency determination in future classes. There are a couple of considerations there for transfer students or students who are placed out of district. And I leave it to the committee how you want to proceed.
Okay. What I want to say a couple of things. First of all, school committee owns the graduation requirements. It is our diploma that we are giving. So I want to make it very clear to the community and members of the committee that this is ours, in our decision and our determination to make. Now, I don't know how much discussion the committee will want to put into this. If the committee views the competency determination is acceptable, we can conceivably vote it at the next meeting. If the committee wants to discuss it further, we can discuss it at the next meeting. I do not want to hear from any of the members of the committee on your opinions about that, because that wanders into deliberation and an open meeting law violation. The only thing that we really need to know is how much of a discussion we need to have about this, so that if you have questions or pushback in any way, would appreciate it if you would contact the superintendent directly so she understands your thinking on this before we engage in a discussion at the next meeting. Does that sound reasonable, Mr. Thielman?
Yes, it does. I might have missed this, Dr. Holman, but what's the timeline for this? Like, when is our timeline for making a decision here?
It would be good it would be good to determine what the competency determination is going to be for the class of 2025 as soon as possible for those students who have not yet achieved it, especially if we are going to switch it dramatically from what is articulated here.
Yeah, okay, so, then, can I ask another follow-up question?
Go ahead.
So are there students in the class of 2025 who?
We have students who have not yet met the competency determination, so we need to tell them what that's going to be.
And so you need to kind of tell them, this is what the school committee is thinking of doing, you got to get there, what's your plan to get there?
And we can decide for this class, and then it doesn't, the program of studies is for next school year.
Right, right. So I just feel like this vote occurred in November of their senior year, and so I'm just trying to think of a way to word this in a way that doesn't impact them negatively in any way, but I don't know. I don't know enough to, I'm thinking out loud. So maybe it'd be good to we meet again in 2 weeks, vote then, and have time with Dr. Holman before 2 weeks.
Make sure that your questions are addressed to her. Yeah. We can vote in 2 weeks, a requirement, a competency determination for the class of 2025 and postpone decisions on 26 and beyond for another meeting or two.
Okay.
If that's the
I know.
If that's the will of the committee, and it's just my job is to lead you where you want to go.
I don't know what my will is right now.
I don't know where the will of the committee is either, and I certainly had some questions in subcommittee.
Okay, I just wanted to thank you.
Okay, Dr. Allison Ampe.
Thank you. So I'm confused. Is this a first read or no?
Potentially. It's out in public right now, so it really serves as a first read.
Yeah, it serves as a first read.
In that the document is in Novus, and people who are interested in this can read it, and it's certainly enough notice within this meeting that we're talking about it without taking any action.
Okay. I can't figure out if I am overstepping my bounds in terms of what I can and cannot discuss for this, but I am happy if this is a first read and then we have a second read next time and we vote on it as the second read, as we do. This gives the reason I thought it was important to have 2 reads at least, was that this is new and different for our public, and often they are unaware until something actually shows up on the agenda. And this gives people the next 2 weeks to pick it up on their radar, and if a whole bunch of people come in next for public participation next time and are like, wait, you forgot something, we can decide that we need to work on it a little bit more. But my understanding from the superintendent before was that although there are students who need to understand the shape of this very soon, that our next meeting is still soon enough. So
We can certainly ask the high school to communicate to stakeholders that this was presented at this meeting, and we'll be discussing it at the next meeting. Dr. Janger, I think I saw your hand up.
Yeah, so I took it down, but I just wanted to say, the language as proposed makes it relatively unlikely that there would be a student who is meeting the graduation requirements for 2025 who has not met the competency determination. However, if it's going to be significantly changed or if we need to look at it, we can't really review individual cases of students who have not done it yet and know that we're going to meet the standard until we have one.
Thank you.
So I think it is important for us to do it quickly.
Okay. Is that a mastodon behind you?
Hi, Finn.
Hi.
That is a mastodon behind. Actually, no, it's a mammoth.
It's a mammoth. Okay. Any other questions or comments from the committee? Seeing no hands up on the Zoom and nothing else from the committee, We'll leave this at the CIAA report and go on to facilities. Mr. Thielman.
Facilities Committee meets again on February 25th or something, the last Tuesday in February.
Okay. Policies and procedures, Mr. Carden.
So we are meeting tomorrow morning, and the policies, because of a Google Docs error on my part, the policies that were uploaded, the draft policies that were uploaded were wrong. So I will circulate them to subcommittee members this evening, and they'll be posted in the morning.
What time is the meeting?
10 o'clock.
10 o'clock, and this is on Zoom? Or
Yeah,
in
it's
person?
hybrid. I'm
Hybrid.
planning to attend on Zoom, but it is hybrid. The only ones that are up for actual vote would be BEDH, the public speaking policy, although there may be edits to that at the meeting, and the recycling policy, which the student Sophie Chen had proposed to us, replacing that with a school waste reduction and diversion policy, which is not controversial. And then there's some additional policies that we'll be discussing. File KI, File JC. File KI is school visitors, and File JC and JCE are the buffer zone policies, just to start the process of editing those.
Okay, thank you. Arlington High School Building Committee, Mr. Thielman.
The Arlington High School Building Committee, we're moving on target. Phase 3 will be open right after February break.
Excellent. Liaison reports. Announcements. Dr. Allison Ampe.
You're muted.
Dr. Allison Ampe, there you go.
Okay, so I wanted to announce both to you folks and the staff and also the general public that AEF, the Arlington Education Foundation, is having its annual Innovation Showcase on the 27th, Monday between 6 and 8.
27th of what month?
January.
Oh, that's up already?
January. Yes.
Wow.
Yes, and they need you to RSVP tonight, if possible, so that they can get a head count in.
I didn't see that.
Yeah, I'm thinking that, I'm not sure if there was an email missed or what. But, yeah, so it's on Monday, it's from 6 to 8. You can get, if you go to AEF, you can get the details in terms of, it's at Punjab, I believe, and you can RSVP and sign up. And they would love to see as many people as possible.
This is a great event. People should go. And this is the day after the wonderful food at the Blue Ribbon, where we're supporting the high school. Yeah, AEEF, or is it 8?
1E.
1E now, AEF. And so that, please look for them on the internet and respond to this. It's a wonderful event.
It's AEFMA.org is the.
AEFMA.org.
Yeah.
So now we're keeping you busy on Sunday and Monday. Be there. Future agenda items. One more item. It was brought to my attention yesterday that the legislation was passed by the legislature, signed to the governor a couple of weeks ago, regarding school bus camera enforcement systems. And as with many things coming from the legislature, this is something that requires the town's acceptance of the legislation. And all of you are town meeting members or former town meeting members, so you sort of understand the town meeting will need to take a vote to accept this legislation should anyone want to go and take advantage of it. So our options are open if the town accepts it, but we can't do anything if the town does not accept the legislation. Because of the timeline of the closing of the warrant, if we don't do anything about this now, it doesn't get into the warrant for this town meeting, and the warrant closes at noon tomorrow. So I'm asking the committee to vote to ask to insert a warrant article to allow town meeting to accept this legislation. The vote is before you in Novus. Question?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Thielman, second by
Second.
Mr. Carden. Mr. Carden.
I guess with the timing, it may not have happened, but is there any word from the police department about them submitting or supporting this?
No, nothing. All this does is puts it in the warrant, which would give us permission to go the next step. If we don't get it in the warrant, we go nowhere. So there's been no time to consult with anybody. It's brand new legislation, but this is just the starting point. So haven't talked to the police, haven't talked to the select board, haven't talked to anybody else. This just saves a place in the warrant so we can discuss it in April. Mr. Thielman.
So, the town votes on this, not the school committee?
The town meeting.
The town meeting?
It's the acceptance of legislation. So the legislation is written and the legislation is in Novus.
Yeah.
So that if a town, which in our case is town meeting, if it's a city, it's a city council. If the town accepts this legislation, we can act under it, but the requirement would be to accept the legislation. So all the warrant article does is ask town meeting, puts an article in town meeting that enables us to, or the select board or anybody else to make a motion to accept this legislation. That's all we're doing is opening the.
And then down the line, we would take a vote as a committee on this motion. So
Yeah, we could certainly recommend to the town
the
to
chair
do
would get up
that.
at town meeting and say X, Y, and Z. Yeah, okay, thank you.
So that's all we're doing is
Yep.
getting this into the warrant so that we can go to the next steps.
Fair enough.
Any other questions or discussions on a motion as presented by Mr. Thielman, seconded by Mr. Carden? Roll call vote. Ms. Exton?
Yes.
Mr. Carden?
Yes.
Dr. Allison Ampe?
Yes.
Mr. Thielman?
Yes.
Ms. Gittleson?
Yes.
Ms. Morgan?
Yes.
Chair votes in the affirmative. That's a 7-0 vote. It is unanimous. Mr. Spiegel, do we have cause for executive session?
Update on.
Yeah, we could do a quick update.
We can do a quick update under executive session. So the executive session would be to conduct strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations with collective bargaining sessions or contract negotiations with AEA and/or AEA or AAA and/or AEA Unit C negotiation discussions. And the chair is required to declare that this would have a detrimental effect on bargaining or litigation position of the public body. Motion by Mr. Thielman, second by
Second.
Ms. Exton. I saw her first. Roll call, Ms. Exton.
Yes.
Mr. Carden.
Yes.
Dr. Allison Ampe.
Yes.
Mr. Thielman.
Yes.
Ms. Gittleson.
Yes.
Ms. Morgan.
Yes.
Chair votes in the affirmative. We are in executive session. We will not be returning to public session. Thank you.